Police officer arrests black woman. His face drops when she flashes her Secret Service badge. Dark clouds gathered over the quiet streets of Meadowbrook County, hinting that a storm was brewing, both in the sky and in the lives of those about to collide. Ebony Walker, a successful yet unassuming black woman, was on her way to visit her mother when flashing red and blue lights pulled her to the side of an abandoned stretch of road. The officer who emerged seemed determined to escalate a situation that barely existed. Little did he know that his moment of bigotry was about to backfire in spectacular fashion. In just moments, his arrogance would crumble when Ebony revealed the powerful secret that would turn his world upside down. In the small community of Meadowbrook County, nestled between the bustling cities of Richmond and Washington, D.C., narrow roads meandered through farmland and sleepy suburban neighborhoods. Despite its calm veneer, tensions often lay simmering beneath the surface. This was the kind of place where everyone assumed they knew everyone else, and outsiders were greeted with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Yet, ironically, Ebony Walker was not entirely an outsider. She had grown up just one county over, but that small difference, combined with the color of her skin, made her a stranger in the eyes of some. It was a humid afternoon, and Ebony was driving a practical black sedan she had purchased a few months earlier. She had taken a day off, one of the few she could afford, away from her high-profile, high-pressure job for a long-overdue family visit. She smiled to herself, thinking about her mother's homemade pecan pie. The memory of its sweet, syrupy aroma never failed to bring warmth to Ebony's heart. She turned up the radio, humming along to an old R&B track, and relaxed into her seat. For a moment, the stress of her demanding career seemed miles away. But that moment of peace shattered when the glare of police lights glinted in her rearview mirror. The siren's wail sliced through the humid air, sending a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. Ebony glanced at her speedometer. She was doing just a bit over the limit, 72 in a 65 zone. Normally, a minor infraction like this might be overlooked, but she was prepared to accept a ticket if it came to that. In her experience, compliance was the safest way. She had been trained to remain calm in moments that could escalate quickly if not handled properly. Pulling onto the gravel shoulder, Ebony shifted into park and rolled down her window. Her heart beat a little faster, a conditioned response from years of cautioning, passed down from her father, who had grown up in a very different America decades earlier. She kept her hands visibly on the steering wheel, silently reciting what she had learned both from family teachings and her extensive law enforcement training. Stay calm. Don't make sudden moves. Answer politely. As she waited, Ebony noticed the officer in the side mirror, a tall, broad-shouldered figure wearing reflective sunglasses. He took an unusually long time to approach. When he finally did, his steps were slow and deliberate, as though he was building up tension for a performance. Leaning forward, Ebony could see the name embroidered on his uniform, Officer B. Thompson. There was something in his posture and the way he angled his head that put her on edge. "License and registration," he barked, not even bothering with a routine greeting. His tone was clipped, dismissive. Ebony nodded politely, reaching for the glove compartment. She moved deliberately, speaking as she did so. "I'm getting my registration from the glove box," she informed him, making sure he knew what she was doing. Her voice was steady, professional, almost second nature. She handed him both items along with proof of insurance. Officer Thompson looked at the documents, but not before giving her a long, disdainful stare. The tension was palpable. Ebony braced herself for whatever the officer might say or do next. Was she being paranoid? Possibly. But the tingle of caution in her gut was unmistakable. She had experienced enough casual racism in her lifetime to detect the signs of something malicious brewing. "You from out of town?" he asked finally, his tone still carrying an edge of accusation rather than curiosity. Ebony explained she was visiting her mother, who lived in a nearby county. The officer scrutinized her registration and license again. A strange glint flickered in his eyes. one Ebony had seen before in people who were looking for an excuse to assert dominance. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," Officer Thompson ordered, taking a step back and placing a hand on his belt. Ebony's heart rate spiked. Step out of the vehicle. For a simple speeding stop. She kept her expression neutral, but took a deep breath. Her training hammered in her head. Remain calm, remain compliant, document everything mentally. "May I know the reason for stepping out, officer?" Ebony asked, her voice steady, though inside she felt a swirl of anxiety. The officer's eyebrows rose above the rim of his sunglasses. "Because I said so," he snapped, hand inching closer to his firearm. Ebony's instincts screamed caution, but she was also aware of her rights. Her entire body tensed, yet she complied, slowly opening the door and stepping onto the gravel shoulder. The sky overhead had grown darker, thick clouds gathering as if mirroring the brewing confrontation. Officer Thompson wasted no time. He turned her around roughly, pressed her up against the side of her car, and began to frisk her. It was humiliating, especially because there was no evident probable cause. Ebony bit her lip to keep from saying anything that might escalate the situation. She was well aware of how quickly these circumstances could spiral out of control. Her wallet, still in her back pocket, contained the most surprising piece of identification, her United States Secret Service badge. But she decided to reveal it, only if necessary. Right now, she chose to see where this officer was going, fully intending to file a complaint later. She closed her eyes for a second, determined to remain calm, but also feeling a surge of anger well up inside. Little did Officer Thompson know the magnitude of the mistake he was about to make. Ebony had the training, the resources, and the resolve not to let this violation of her rights go unanswered. And though the darkening sky threatened a storm, Ebony knew the real storm was about to begin the moment Officer Thompson dug himself deeper into an irreversible mistake. The drizzle started as a faint tapping on the car roof, but within minutes a full rainstorm drenched Meadowbrook County. It came in thick sheets, turning the roadside into a muddy mess. The flashing police lights added an eerie glow to the bleak scene. Ebony stood in the downpour, her heart pounding with the sting of injustice. Her hair clung to her forehead, and her clothes were quickly soaking through. Yet the discomfort of the storm was nothing compared to the humiliation she felt. Officer Thompson seemed entirely unaffected by the rain. He casually flipped through her documents as though relishing the power he held over her in that moment. His lips curled into a smirk, and Ebony could feel the condescending stare through his reflective sunglasses. A fleeting thought ran through her mind. If only he knew. If only he realized who he was dealing with. "Well, Mrs. Walker," he began, drawing out each syllable of her name as if to mock it. "It seems your license is valid. Registration is good. Insurance checks out." He paused dramatically, as though waiting for Ebony to relax, only to twist the knife. "But you were going 7 miles over the speed limit, and I'm going to have to cite you for that. Also, I want to check if your vehicle is involved in any reported issues. I'll need to do a thorough search." Ebony's jaw tightened. Her nerves crackled with tension. 7 miles over the limit was hardly a reason for this level of scrutiny, nor did it automatically grant the officer the right to search her vehicle. In her training with the Secret Service, she had learned to identify when someone was abusing their authority. And everything about Officer Thompson's demeanor screamed of a power trip. He was not interested in a routine traffic stop. He was fishing for something to pin on her. "I don't consent to a search, officer," Ebony said firmly, though respectfully. She stood straighter, trying to summon her professional composure. Rainwater dripped down her face as thunder rumbled in the distance. Thompson chuckled, a menacing sound lost amidst the rain. "Oh, you don't consent, huh?" he repeated, taking a step toward her. "You people always have something to hide." He spat the words out, the phrase "you people" hitting Ebony's ears like a slap in the face. Her heart fluttered with anger and a hint of fear. She had encountered racism before, but there was something especially vile in the way Thompson spoke. It was more than ignorance. It was a hatred that had found authority and power, which made it doubly dangerous. Before Ebony could respond, Thompson opened her driver's door and rummaged through the car, ignoring her lack of consent. Ebony took a shaky breath, her mind racing. This was illegal search and seizure, plain and simple. But Ebony was equally aware that objecting too forcefully could worsen the situation, especially in the pouring rain on a deserted highway. She clenched her fists, silently cursing the predicament. If only there were witnesses here. Finally, Thompson emerged from the vehicle holding Ebony's wallet. He flipped it open. Ebony's pulse quickened. He was about to see the single piece of information that would end this fiasco in an instant, her Secret Service credentials. She braced herself, half expecting a dramatic revelation. But the officer only squinted at the first thing he saw, a standard driver's license. For some reason, he didn't flip further to the hidden compartment holding her badge. He tossed the wallet carelessly on the passenger seat and looked her up and down. Nothing in there, for now. The venom in his voice was impossible to miss. Then, as though he'd sensed Ebony's frustration, he stepped even closer, lowering his voice. "Now, if you don't cause me any more problems, maybe I'll let you off with a warning." His insinuation was as clear as a lightning bolt against a stormy sky. Ebony's mind whirled with indignation. A part of her wanted to rip off the facade and throw her Secret Service badge in his face, but another part of her wanted to see just how far this officer would go. Her father had always told her, injustice can't hide in the dark forever. It always steps into the light eventually. Ebony felt that unmasking him fully might require more than a quick flash of her badge on a lonely highway. She considered her next move carefully. "I'm not causing any problems," Ebony said, forcing her voice to remain calm despite the thudding in her chest. "I just want to understand my rights." At that, Thompson's smirk returned. The silence between them sizzled with tension. Rain slapped the asphalt, and in the distance, a car or two raced by, oblivious to what was happening on the shoulder. Ebony wondered if any onlookers would take note of the police cruiser's lights through the sheets of rain. Finally, Thompson shrugged and marched back to his squad car without offering Ebony any shelter from the downpour. She stood there, soaked, forcing herself to breathe. The adrenaline was wearing on her. She recalled the myriad of training scenarios she'd been through, but none had captured the raw emotional sting of this moment. This wasn't just about the law, it was about dignity. Hers and every person's who had been in her shoes. For a brief moment, Ebony's gaze drifted upward. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the world in a brilliant flash. The thunder followed with a roar. Something inside her clicked. This storm was not just nature's fury. It was symbolic of the tempest swirling around them, power, prejudice, and the fight for justice. She stepped back to her car, hearing Thompson's muffled voice inside his cruiser. Perhaps he was radioing in her information. The question was, what did he intend to do with it? Ebony clenched her fists, her mind racing between compliance and confrontation. The part of her that had sworn an oath to protect and serve the country wanted to do everything by the book. The part of her that was just a tired, wronged woman wanted to scream. But Ebony knew there was a higher purpose here. She would see how Thompson played this hand, and when the time was right, she would reveal her trump card, her status as a federal agent of the United States Secret Service. In that moment, Ebony vowed to herself. This officer's racism and abuse of power wouldn't go unchecked. She would ensure that the same uniform he was dishonoring would deliver him the justice he deserved. A few more excruciating minutes passed before Thompson emerged again. This time, he gestured for Ebony to approach his cruiser. The cold wind whipped around them, rain still slanting, though less intensely than before. With a resigned sigh, Ebony complied, walking carefully to avoid slipping on the wet pavement. She approached the open passenger-side window, where Thompson was seated behind the wheel, radio crackling beside him. His gaze swept over her with a mocking interest. "Seems your name popped up, Ms. Walker," he said. "There's something about you that isn't adding up." The threat in his tone sent Ebony's senses into overdrive. "Officer, I'm sure I can clarify—" Ebony began, but Thompson silenced her with a raised hand. "You'll speak when I ask a question," he snarled, turning his radio down. Ebony's jaw tightened. This was beyond a typical traffic stop. It was turning into open harassment, fueled by the officer's prejudice and his thirst for intimidation. Thompson continued, "Our system indicates you've had extensive background checks, some deeper than usual for a civilian. Care to explain that?" Ebony's heart fluttered. He was tapping into data that was typically classified or at least not standard for local police. But that was the nature of her position with the Secret Service. Her profile was flagged as secure in federal databases. Local departments sometimes had partial, often confusing access to that information. Thompson was out of his depth. "I've worked for the federal government," Ebony replied, choosing her words deliberately. She didn't reveal everything yet, waiting for the right moment. She still wanted to see what Thompson would do. His eyes narrowed. "Worked for the federal government, huh?" he repeated mockingly. "That doesn't tell me anything, and I don't like mysteries." He stepped out of the cruiser, slamming the door so forcefully that Ebony flinched. He was within arm's reach now, and Ebony could see the lines of anger around his mouth. "Turn around," he demanded, voice cold. Ebony hesitated for a split second. This was going too far. She was no longer being detained for a traffic violation. This was an unlawful arrest if he proceeded. "Did you hear me?" he barked, hand drifting toward his holster. Ebony knew she had the training to disarm him if he drew his weapon, but that would have far-reaching consequences. Resisting arrest was never a good look, even for a federal agent, unless there was an immediate threat to her life. Reluctantly, Ebony turned, feeling the officer's rough grip on her wrists. "You're under arrest," he spat, yanking her hands behind her back. Ebony's stomach dropped. This was insane. Resisting a lawful search, interfering with police business, and possible forgery or identity theft of government credentials. Ebony's eyes widened at the last charge. He was grasping at straws, forging allegations out of thin air to justify his bigotry. Officer Thompson snapped the handcuffs on Nisam. The cold metal bit into her wrists. She could feel the tension in his hands, sense the twisted satisfaction he took in dominating her like this. Ebony's heart pounded with both fury and fear, but she had to remain controlled. For a brief, fleeting instant, she considered letting him book her and letting the system handle it. But in that same second, her father's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her that the system sometimes fails the people it's supposed to protect, especially when racism is involved. She couldn't leave her fate solely to chance. In one smooth motion, Ebony twisted her body slightly, trying to keep her movements non-threatening. "Officer Thompson," she said, calm but firm. She turned her head just enough to catch his eye. "I strongly suggest you look at the other ID in my wallet." "What ID?" he growled, trying to maintain his superiority. "Inside my wallet is a federal badge," Ebony replied. "I'm an agent with the United States Secret Service." For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. Rain dripped from the brim of Thompson's cap onto Ebony's shoulder. The officer blinked, clearly taken aback. He let out a scoff that faltered halfway, reflecting his sudden uncertainty. Ebony could see the gears turning in his head as he pieced things together. If Ebony was telling the truth, he was in deep trouble. "Liar!" he spat, but there was a waver in his voice that hadn't been there before. Without loosening his grip, he reached for the wallet in the cruiser. He fumbled around with the flap Ebony knew concealed the badge. Then, his grip on her wrists loosened slightly. A stunned silence followed. Ebony imagined the realization hitting him like a freight train, the golden shield and credentials, complete with her name and photograph, validated by the Department of Homeland Security. This was the moment Ebony had dreaded and anticipated in equal measure. She felt a small rush of satisfaction, overshadowed by the humiliating predicament of being handcuffed in the first place. This, Thompson stammered, stepping back, his face drained of color. Officer Thompson had just done the unthinkable. He had arrested and manhandled a federal agent without proper cause. In the next beat, Ebony expected him to release her, apologize, and plead for mercy. But he did none of those things. Instead, he tightened the cuffs again, trying to reassert his failing authority. "I don't know if this is real," he muttered. "I've seen fakes before." His denial was laced with desperation. "I'm taking you in until I can verify everything." Ebony saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, but also the resolute bigotry refusing to let him admit he was wrong. A million thoughts bombarded Ebony's mind at once. She could easily call her supervisor or the local U.S. Secret Service field office, and they'd come down on Thompson like a hammer, but she also knew how local politics could complicate matters. Nevertheless, there was no way she was letting him drag her into a humiliating booking process without a fight. "Officer Thompson, I am ordering you as a federal agent to remove these cuffs and refrain from further illegal detention," Ebony announced, her voice authoritative. "Failure to comply can and will result in immediate ramifications for you and your department." She didn't want to pull rank like this, but he left her no choice. The tension was so thick that even the air seemed to quake. Thompson stood still, rigid, caught between his racist contempt and the logical fear of what he had just unleashed upon himself. Ebony could almost see the rage in his eyes, rage that he had been cornered, that his target was not someone he could bully without consequence. He gritted his teeth, then jerked Ebony sideways. "Let's see what the sheriff has to say about that," he hissed, pushing her roughly into the passenger seat of his cruiser. The door slammed shut, leaving Ebony locked inside. Through the windshield, she saw Thompson place a call on his radio. The wind howled, rain lashing the roads, while Ebony's mind sprinted through possible outcomes and next steps. She had no illusions. Thompson was likely trying to figure out a way to spin this situation to save himself. But Ebony was not powerless. She still had her phone in her jacket pocket. Thankfully, it had not been confiscated yet. Though her hands were cuffed, she might just manage to call for help. Before Ebony could consider her next move further, the cruiser's door opened and Thompson slid behind the wheel. "We're heading to the station," he grunted, refusing to meet her eyes. He put the key in the ignition with a shaky hand. Ebony took a slow, measured breath. This was far from over, and the biggest storm of Thompson's life was just about to begin. A heavy silence filled the patrol car as Officer Thompson drove through the rain toward the Meadowbrook County Sheriff's Station. Ebony sat in the passenger seat, with her hands still cuffed behind her. Her shoulders ached and anger simmered in her chest. She gazed out the window at the blurred scenery. Normally, the farmland and quaint houses passing by would evoke some nostalgia, but now every drop of rain on the glass felt like an accusation. Her phone remained in her jacket pocket, pressing against her side. She tried to shift her body inconspicuously, hoping to maneuver her cuffed hands close enough to retrieve it. If she could dial her supervisor or even 911, she could identify herself as a federal agent and end this madness. But with every slight movement, Thompson's keen eyes would flick over, forcing Ebony to remain as still as possible. Ebony's release from the sheriff's station was anything but triumphant. She stepped outside into the drizzle, relieved to be free but weighed down by a cocktail of anger, humiliation, and grim resolve. Her wrists bore red marks from the cuffs, stinging reminders that she, a federal agent sworn to uphold the law, had been subjected to blatant bigotry. The short deputy handed over her wallet and phone, mumbling a half-hearted apology. Sheriff Kilpatrick was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding in his office to avoid further confrontation. As for Thompson, he had vanished entirely, probably hoping to retreat from the avalanche of consequences. Ebony clutched her wallet tight, flipping it open to confirm her badge was intact. The shining emblem of the Secret Service offered a small comfort, a reminder that she had power in this fight. Stepping away from the station, Ebony immediately called her supervisor in D.C., Special Agent in Charge Matthew Price. She explained what had happened, sparing no detail. Price's outrage was evident in the clipped way he spoke. "I'll handle the top-level communications," he assured her. "You have every right to pursue this personally, Ebony. Don't let them sweep it under the rug." After the call, Ebony glanced up at the clearing sky. The storm clouds were breaking, revealing shafts of pale sunlight. She thought about her mother, probably worried sick by now, but Ebony also knew she couldn't simply go about her day as if nothing had happened. There was a pressing need to address the injustice. She slid into her car, still parked where she'd left it hours earlier, and sat there for a moment, letting the engine idle. The adrenaline still coursed through her. Part of her wanted to drive straight home and curl up under her favorite blanket, shutting out the world. But Ebony had never been one to back down. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed a brief email to the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General, summarizing the events. She also made sure to CC an independent civil rights organization that specialized in law enforcement accountability. Then she composed a message to a local reporter she knew, Alicia Martinez from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Alicia had once covered a story about Ebony's role in busting a counterfeiting ring. She was a dogged journalist who wouldn't shy away from investigating an abusive cop. Ebony typed quickly, Alicia, I hope you're well. I have a story you might be interested in. Discriminatory policing, abuse of authority, and an officer's attempt to arrest a federal agent on false pretenses. Let me know if you want details. Ebony. Hitting send felt like lighting a fuse. She knew Alicia's involvement would inevitably draw media attention, which in turn would pressure local authorities to respond transparently. Despite the sure wave of discomfort to come, Ebony felt a surge of determination. She refused to be silent. Her next call was to her mother. Mom, I'm sorry, Ebony said gently. I got held up. She offered a simplified version of the incident, emphasizing that she was okay. As expected, her mother fussed over her safety, her voice laced with fear and frustration. Ebony calmed her down, promising to visit the next day. For now, Ebony had a mission that couldn't wait. Once off the phone, Ebony took a steadying breath and drove off. Instead of heading home or to her mother's house, she aimed her car toward Meadowbrook County's City Hall. She wanted to check local records, see if there had been past complaints against Officer Thompson or the Sheriff's Department. Maybe it was a shot in the dark, but Ebony had a hunch this wasn't Thompson's first time abusing power. As Ebony navigated the small-town streets, she felt the weight of curious stares. Her out-of-county plates and her resolute expression drew attention, but she ignored it. Stopping in front of a modest red-brick municipal building, Ebony stepped out and entered a lobby with peeling linoleum floors. A clerk behind the counter glanced up from her computer. "Hi, I'm looking for publicly available records on law enforcement misconduct or complaints filed within Meadowbrook County," Ebony said, forcing a pleasant smile despite her simmering anger. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, looked momentarily taken aback. "Oh, we don't often get requests like that in person," she said. "Usually they come by email." She directed Ebony to a small side office where public records were stored in both digital and paper formats. For the next 2 hours, Ebony combed through an assortment of documents, annual reports, press releases, scattered complaint forms. It was tedious work, made worse by the musty smell of old files. But Ebony's patience paid off. She found multiple references to excessive force allegations against a B. Thompson dating back several years. Most of these complaints were investigated internally and ultimately deemed unsubstantiated. Ebony's brow furrowed. It was the same pattern she had seen too many times, complaints quietly shelved, no real accountability. Her phone buzzed, a text from Alicia Martinez. "Absolutely interested. Can we meet tomorrow? I want an on-record statement." Ebony replied with a quick yes, then resumed her search, scanning for anything on Sheriff Kilpatrick's ties. She unearthed old newspaper clippings referencing his close friendship with a county judge known for lenient sentencing of certain deputies. Another article hinted that Kilpatrick had a reputation for turning a blind eye to misconduct, though no formal investigations had ever stuck. Ebony felt a swirl of emotions reading these old records. On one hand, she was relieved to find evidence supporting her suspicion that Thompson and the Sheriff's Department had a history. On the other, it was disheartening to see how many victims had been silenced. She packed up her notes, made copies where she could, and returned the files. Before leaving, she thanked the clerk for her help. The woman smiled sympathetically. With a folder of documents in hand, Ebony made her way back to her car. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the small town. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about one bad cop harassing a single federal agent. It was about systemic abuse, a pattern of negligence, and the suffocating weight of unchecked power in a place where people had little recourse. As she started the engine, Ebony caught a glimpse of her reflection in the rearview mirror. Tired, wet hair still slightly disheveled, eyes hardened by the day's events. She pressed her lips together in a tight line, reminded herself that real justice takes time, but Ebony had resources, connections, and unwavering resolve. Thompson had made the mistake of assuming she was an easy target. He would soon learn the cost of that assumption. The next step was clear. Ebony needed to file her complaint formally, gather evidence, and ensure the world knew about Thompson's misconduct. Because if there was one thing Ebony Walker believed in, it was shining a light on darkness, no matter how deep the shadows ran. Early the next morning, Ebony woke up to find multiple missed calls and text messages. Word was spreading faster than she anticipated. She had a voicemail from an official in the Department of Homeland Security, emphasizing that if she wanted the agency's backing, she needed to follow official channels. She had no issue with that. She recognized the protocol, file a report, allow an internal review, and possibly trigger a separate Department of Justice inquiry. Despite the bureaucratic labyrinth, Ebony was determined to push ahead. She also had a text from Alicia Martinez. Confirmed a meeting at 2 p.m. at the Bean Brew Cafe near City Hall. Be ready for on-the-record statements. Let's make noise. Ebony smiled at the message. Alicia's grit was exactly what she needed. After a quick shower and a strong cup of coffee, Ebony got dressed in business casual attire, slacks, and a crisp blouse. She wanted to exude professionalism, to show that she was not just any random citizen complaining about police misconduct. She was a federal agent with the evidence and the moral high ground to demand accountability. Her first stop was the Meadowbrook County Sheriff's Station, but this time she walked in through the front doors with her badge displayed prominently on a lanyard. Heads turned immediately. The same short deputy from the day before froze when he saw her, his eyes widening with a mixture of respect and dread. Ebony approached the reception desk, ignoring the tension in the air. "I'm here to file an official complaint against Officer Brad Thompson," Ebony said calmly, using the officer's full first name for the record. The deputy behind the desk gulped, nodding wordlessly. He handed Ebony a form and directed her to a quiet corner of the waiting area. She could feel multiple pairs of eyes on her back as she filled out the document, carefully detailing the unlawful stop, search, detention, and the racist language Thompson had used. She attached references to possible supporting evidence, body camera footage, traffic camera recordings, station logs. When Ebony finished, she returned the form to the deputy, who carefully placed it in a folder. "I'll make sure this gets to the sheriff," he said, not meeting her gaze. "And I expect a timely response," Ebony added, voice even. She didn't need to raise her tone. Her badge and unwavering stare did the talking. She thanked the deputy and left, aware that the entire station was watching her every move. She hoped her actions would embolden any decent officers in that building to stand for what was right. Next, Ebony drove to the Bean Brew Cafe. The small shop had a warm, inviting atmosphere with exposed brick walls and the aroma of freshly ground coffee. Alicia Martinez was easy to spot. A tall Latina woman with shoulder-length black hair and a poised demeanor that hinted at her journalistic tenacity. She was seated at a corner table, a laptop open before her, and a steaming latte at her elbow. "Ebony," Alicia greeted, standing up to offer a hug. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Same," Ebony replied, taking a seat opposite Alicia. She quickly summarized the ordeal. Alicia listened intently, occasionally typing notes on her laptop. When Ebony finished, Alicia leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. "That's horrifying," she said, swirling her latte absently. "You'd think that with all the scrutiny on policing these days, officers would at least be more careful about blatant abuses of power." "It seems Thompson doesn't care or thinks he's untouchable," Ebony said, shrugging in frustration. "And from the records I pulled, he's had multiple complaints. The department and Sheriff Kilpatrick have shielded him every time." Alicia nodded. "I can run with this story, but I'll need more than just your statement. Are you okay going on record as an active federal agent?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. Ebony paused, thinking about the possible fallout. The Secret Service was particular about media exposure, but Ebony believed in the cause. "Yes," she finally said. "As long as certain sensitive details about my assignments remain off the record, I'm willing to be named as an agent." "Understood." Alicia's fingers flew over the keyboard. "What about the body cam footage? Do you know if Thompson was wearing one?" "He should have been," Ebony said. "It's standard in Meadowbrook County, but I haven't confirmed whether the footage was tampered with. Still, that's crucial evidence." Alicia nodded. "I'll file a request for the footage under the Freedom of Information Act. It may take a while, but it'll bolster your case if it shows what you say it shows." She paused, studying Ebony. "There's also the angle of racism. Are you comfortable discussing that on the record?" Ebony let out a long breath, recalling the officer's words. "You people always have something to hide." The phrase still sent a shiver down her spine. Yes, it's a key part of the story. His language, his attitude. It wasn't just about me speeding. This was about him seeing a black woman he thought he could bully. Alicia nodded solemnly. "All right, I'll craft a preliminary piece and pitch it to my editor. Expect calls from other news outlets once it's published. People are going to want your version of events. It might get overwhelming." "I'm prepared," Ebony replied. "I want to shine a light on this. I can handle the heat." With that, Alicia reached over and pressed the record button on her phone. "Let's do this. Just walk me through it step by step for the record." Ebony took a final sip of her coffee, steadying herself. Then she delved into the details, describing the tension on the roadside, the handcuffs, Thompson's racist remarks, and the shock on his face when he saw her badge. Alicia recorded every word, occasionally asking clarifying questions. By the end, Ebony felt a mix of exhaustion and liberation. Alicia stopped the recording and checked her notes. "This is going to cause quite a stir," she said, not unkindly. "I'll try to get the article out by tomorrow. You'll have the full support of the newspaper, but be ready for a PR battle from Sheriff Kilpatrick." "I can handle it," Ebony repeated. She was about to stand up when Alicia reached across the table and touched her arm gently. "Hey, I know you're used to dealing with high-pressure situations, but local politics can be nasty. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need backup or if something else happens." Ebony smiled, feeling genuine gratitude. "Thanks, Alicia. You might regret offering that, because I might take you up on it." They shared a short laugh, the tension easing if only for a moment. The seriousness of their conversation still loomed, but they both recognized the importance of exposing the truth. After finalizing a few more details, Ebony said her goodbyes and headed out, determination burning brighter than ever. In her car, she stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror again. This time, there was no lingering sense of defeat, only resolve. By involving Alicia and filing official complaints, Ebony was stepping onto a battlefield. She thought of the countless individuals, especially black men and women, who had endured similar harassment and lacked the means or the privilege to seek justice. She wondered how many incidents never made headlines, how many perpetrators walked free with no repercussions. Not this time, Ebony vowed silently. This time, justice would be served, and the hammer would fall. She started her car, the engine's rumble echoing in her ears like a clarion call. The fight was on. In one high-profile interview on a regional news channel, Ebony faced a panel that included a representative from a police union. The representative tried to push the narrative that Ebony's credentials weren't immediately verifiable and that Thompson was just doing his job to ensure public safety. Ebony countered calmly, highlighting the clear lack of probable cause and the officer's racist remarks caught on camera. The segment ended with the host unequivocally condemning the officer's actions, leaving the police union representative visibly rattled. Meanwhile, Alicia's articles continued to expose more background on Thompson and the sheriff's department. Past complainants surfaced, emboldened by Ebony's bravery. They gave interviews detailing how their allegations were ignored or covered up. Public sentiment sharply turned against the county's law enforcement leadership. Petitions demanded that not only Thompson be fired, but also that Sheriff Kilpatrick resign. Ebony witnessed the shift with a complex blend of emotions. She was gratified to see the community speaking out and horrifying truths being acknowledged. Yet she also knew the backlash could get dangerous. Officer Thompson still had loyal colleagues, and Sheriff Kilpatrick was not a man to go down without a fight. Ebony took precautions, varying her driving routes, staying aware of her surroundings, and keeping her personal details locked down. One evening, she checked her mailbox and found an anonymous note scrawled on a piece of paper, "Drop it or else." She felt a chill snake down her spine, but refused to be intimidated. She promptly handed the note over to the FBI's local office. If her activism was drawing threats, so be it. She wouldn't be silenced. In the midst of all this turmoil, Ebony reminded herself of the bigger picture. This was not about her alone. She thought of Lorraine and her son, of the older gentleman in the church, of every person who had suffered under Thompson's abuse of power. The body cam footage was more than evidence. It was a catalyst for change, a tool to awaken a community long silenced. And Ebony would stand at the forefront, unwavering, until justice was done. In the morning, Ebony relayed Deputy Rivers' information to the DOJ. The agent she spoke with confirmed that a witness protection arrangement could be made if Rivers' testimony was crucial to the investigation. Ebony felt a surge of relief. Perhaps they were on the brink of a tipping point. Still, Ebony braced herself for the sheriff's counterattack. She expected him to lash out publicly, maybe try to discredit her again, or blame her for stirring trouble, but even she couldn't anticipate how low Kilpatrick would sink to save himself. The next day, Ebony was at her mother's house, finally sharing some much-needed family time. Her mother fussed over her, making sure she was well fed with homemade pecan pie and iced tea. The sweet aroma of cinnamon and sugar wafted through the cozy kitchen, momentarily soothing Ebony's frayed nerves. Her phone lay on the kitchen table, face down. Ebony had deliberately set it aside to enjoy a brief respite from the chaos. Yet a nagging part of her mind remained alert, waiting for the next inevitable development. She and her mother were chatting about family memories when the phone buzzed repeatedly, urgent vibrations that broke the tranquility. Ebony picked it up, scanning the screen. Several missed calls from Alicia Martinez, followed by frantic texts. "Call me ASAP. Huge story. Sheriff's press conference." Ebony's stomach lurched. She excused herself and stepped onto the porch, pressing Alicia's number. "Oh my God, Ebony, where have you been?" Alicia's voice was almost hysterical. "Sheriff Kilpatrick just held a press conference, and he accused you of misconduct. He claims you fabricated the story, tampered with footage, and threatened Thompson. He's calling you a rogue agent who's fueling anti-police sentiment." Ebony felt her blood turn to ice. "What? That's absurd. The DOJ is investigating them, not me. The body cam footage is real." "I know," Alicia said, breathless. "He provided zero evidence, but he's demanding a federal review of your role in the case. He's trying to paint himself as a victim of a targeted smear campaign. It's all smoke and mirrors, but he's on every local station spewing this garbage." Ebony's jaw clenched. She immediately thought of Deputy Rivers' risk in coming forward. Was Kilpatrick pulling a distraction tactic to cover his own wrongdoing? Possibly. But it infuriated Ebony to see him tarnish her reputation and potentially muddy the waters of the investigation. She exhaled slowly, controlling her anger. "All right, Alicia. I'll respond. Let me talk to the DOJ and see if they have a statement." "I'll be working on an article refuting his claims," Alicia said. I'll use direct quotes from the DOJ. But Ebony, be careful. Kilpatrick's playing dirty. Thanks, Alicia. You too. Keep me posted. Ebony hung up, her heart pounding. She glanced through the open screen door at her mother, who sensed something was off. Ebony gave her a reassuring nod. I'm okay, Mom, then dialed the Department of Justice liaison. The liaison answered on the second ring. We're aware of the sheriff's statements, she said calmly. They have no legal basis. The footage is verified authentic, and the investigation stands. Can the DOJ issue a public statement clarifying that? Ebony asked, desperation creeping into her voice. I don't want the public confused by his lies. We will release a clarification soon, the liaison reassured. In the meantime, keep documenting any threats or false claims. Don't engage directly with Kilpatrick's accusations. Let the investigation speak for itself. Ebony ended the call with a mix of relief and lingering worry. Even if the DOJ clarified matters, the sheriff's propaganda could sway some locals. She imagined segments of the community believing Kilpatrick's narrative, especially those predisposed to distrust outsiders or dismiss allegations of racism. Ebony walked back into the kitchen, her mind buzzing. What's wrong, baby? Her mother asked, concern etched on her face. Ebony rubbed her temples. Sheriff Kilpatrick is on the offensive. He's claiming I made this all up. Her mother pursed her lips. People aren't stupid, Ebony. They've seen the footage. They know you wouldn't lie. That might not stop the sheriff from riling up his supporters, Ebony said. But I'm not backing down. Her mother pressed a reassuring hand over Ebony's. You remember what your father used to say? When the devil's cornered, he'll throw anything at you to make you stumble. But stand tall. Don't you forget that. Ebony nodded, tears pricking her eyes. Memories of her father's unwavering moral compass flooded her thoughts. She steeled herself. She would stand tall, no matter the smear campaign, no matter the intimidation tactics. Later that evening, Ebony received calls from multiple news stations wanting her reaction to Kilpatrick's statements. She chose a single primetime local broadcast to counter the sheriff's claims in a controlled manner. The anchor introduced her with a rundown of recent events, then asked, Agent Walker, how do you respond to Sheriff Kilpatrick's accusation that you fabricated evidence? Ebony maintained a calm, measured tone. The body cam footage was leaked from within the sheriff's department. It has been verified as authentic by multiple sources, including the media's own forensic analysts. I have no incentive to fabricate evidence, and the Department of Justice is currently investigating the department, not me. I stand by my account. The anchor nodded. Kilpatrick also alleges you threatened Officer Thompson. Is there any truth to that? None, Ebony replied firmly. All I did was identify myself as a federal agent when he unlawfully detained me. He ignored my legitimate credentials and proceeded with an illegal arrest. That's all documented on video. By the interview's end, Ebony had addressed each of Kilpatrick's points, citing objective facts. She also mentioned the other complaints against Thompson and the internal affairs documents. The anchor seemed convinced, but Ebony knew the sheriff's supporters would still cling to his narrative. Nevertheless, Ebony felt she had done what she could to safeguard her reputation and keep the focus on the real issue, the sheriff's corrupt leadership. After the segment aired, Ebony's phone buzzed again, this time from unknown numbers. Instead of threats, she received messages of support and gratitude, locals thanking her for standing up, law enforcement officers from neighboring counties encouraging her perseverance, even some national figures praising her integrity. Ebony felt a momentary warmth, like a candle flickering against the darkness. But she also knew this was far from over. Kilpatrick was desperate, and desperate men often acted rashly. Ebony braced herself for what might come next, ready to defend the truth at all costs. 2 weeks later, tensions in Meadowbrook County reached a fever pitch. The The DOJ investigation was in full swing, with rumors that charges against Thompson and possibly other department officials were imminent. Sheriff Kilpatrick continued his smear campaign, but it seemed to lose steam with every new revelation of departmental misconduct. A pivotal community meeting was scheduled at the Meadowbrook County Hall to discuss proposals for police reform. Public interest was sky-high, with many residents planning to attend. Ebony debated whether to go, worried that her presence might provoke a confrontation, but after discussing with Alicia and local activists, she decided to attend as a concerned citizen. That evening, Ebony arrived to find the hall buzzing with energy. People packed the seats, and some stood along the walls. A panel of county supervisors sat at the front, flanked by the mayor and other local officials. The mood was tense yet hopeful. This gathering felt like a crossroads, where Meadowbrook could either pivot toward real change or sink deeper into mistrust. Ebony settled in a seat near the back, wearing a simple blouse and slacks. She didn't flaunt her badge, but carried it discreetly, prepared for any escalation. Around her, familiar faces from the church meeting nodded in greeting. Lorraine White smiled tearfully, holding her son's hand. It comforted Ebony to see them in attendance, refusing to be silenced. The meeting began with an overview from the mayor, who acknowledged the recent controversy and stressed the importance of transparency. Then the floor opened for public comments. One by one, residents stepped up to the microphone, some to vent about old grievances, others to offer constructive ideas for reform. The supervisors appeared nervous, aware that each word could be scrutinized by both the public and the DOJ. After half an hour of testimony, Ebony felt a shift in the room. People were venting frustration, but also forging a collective determination. It was a powerful display of grassroots democracy. As Ebony contemplated whether to speak, the next attendee was announced, Sheriff Robert Kilpatrick. The tipping point arrived sooner than anyone expected. Less than a week after the contentious town hall meeting, the Department of Justice announced formal charges against Officer Brad Thompson for violating Ebony's civil rights under color of law. Even more shocking, Sheriff Kilpatrick was indicted on charges of conspiracy to obstruct justice, stemming from a pattern of covering up departmental misconduct. News vans descended on Meadowbrook County once more. This time, their cameras focused on the sheriff's station and on Sheriff Kilpatrick, being escorted away in handcuffs by federal agents. The once invincible figure was now an emblem of corruption, undone by his own hubris. Residents gathered in disbelief, some cheering, others shaken by the abrupt fall of the county's top lawman. Ebony watched the live coverage with a solemn expression. She felt no joy in seeing another human handcuffed, even if that human had orchestrated her unlawful arrest and attempted to smear her reputation. But she did feel relief and a sense of justice. Lorraine White called her that afternoon, voice trembling with hope. "They're reopening my son's case," she said tearfully, "and they said Thompson's testimony might invalidate a lot of his previous arrests. My boy could finally be free." "I'm so happy to hear that," Ebony said, tears pricking at her own eyes. "He deserves justice." Deputy Rivers also reached out, thanking Ebony for helping him come forward. He'd been placed in a protective arrangement, away from Kilpatrick's retaliation. Rivers' testimony had sealed the conspiracy charge against the sheriff, detailing how Kilpatrick systematically doctored internal affairs reports. Meanwhile, Ebony's phone buzzed incessantly with new interview requests. She did a handful, just enough to reiterate the importance of systemic reform, then politely declined further media appearances, eager to reclaim some privacy. She also spoke with her Secret Service supervisor, who commended her courage, but reminded her to be cautious about overshadowing her primary duties. Ebony acknowledged the point, grateful that her agency stood by her during this ordeal. One crisp morning, Ebony finally made the trip she'd postponed, visiting her father's grave. The cemetery lay on a gentle slope, dotted with oak trees, their leaves rustling in the breeze. Ebony carried a small bouquet of flowers, sunflowers, her father's favorite. She knelt at the headstone, tracing his name carved in granite. "Dad," she murmured, voice trembling. "I wish you were here. You always taught me to stand up for what's right. I hope I did you proud." A gentle breeze ruffled Ebony's hair, and a single ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, bathing the headstone in warm light. Ebony smiled through her tears, believing, if only for a moment, that her father was there with her, nodding in approval. Rising to her feet, Ebony felt the weight of the past few weeks lifting from her shoulders. Though the battle for accountability was ongoing, real progress had been made. Thompson would face legal repercussions, and the sheriff's reign of terror had ended. Meadowbrook County was already forming a civilian review board, with an interim sheriff pledging to rebuild community trust. The road to lasting reform would be long, but Ebony took solace in having catalyzed that journey. She left the cemetery with a renewed sense of purpose, driving into a future where she would continue serving her country, but also championing justice in her personal capacity. For Ebony Walker, her ordeal had become a testament to resilience. She had faced down a racist officer, an embattled sheriff, and a wave of misinformation, yet she stood unbroken, her integrity intact. Hard karma had indeed hit back, not just in the downfall of Thompson and Kilpatrick, but in the awakening of an entire community that refused to be silent any longer. In the end, the storm had raged across Meadowbrook County, uprooting decades of complacency and dishonesty. And in its aftermath, the seeds of a more equitable future were planted, watered by the courage of those who dared to stand up and speak out.